So this is the plane cast I've been sort of dreading having to make. And it's the fourth thing I did wrong in my company when I started it, and it's patience or lack thereof. And it manifested itself in a number of different ways, but here's a real obvious one. When we started off after a year or two, I sort of dialed in our sales cycle and said, hey, you know what, we have a 2 to 3 month sales cycle. But I was lying to myself because I wasn't looking at the projects that took a year to develop and finally hit. I was looking at the ones that on the short end were about a month or so, and then I looked at some that averaged, 3 or 4 months, but I ignored the ones that were a year and a half out. And the reality is it's about a 6 to 8 month sales cycle. Same with turning up new employees. You want to say you can turn an experienced engineer up in a week or two, but the reality is there's a lot of details and projects and things, and maybe it's 4 weeks or 6 weeks. But I kind of came up with this rule of a third, which means the world moves at a third the speed you want it to, or that you hope it will. And it was funny because I brought that up to a friend's wife recently, and she's a fast mover as well, like a lot of startups and entrepreneurs are. And she tried it out, and she came back to me after a week, and she's like, oh, yeah, it's about a third. And so I really took that to heart, and I started trying to be really honest with my data. And then the second thing I did was I took the time that I now had, because I was being more patient, to really work through some of the details with my team. And I'm not saying that as founders you should be in the weeds, because we know that if we get caught in the weeds, we get in trouble. But we need to appreciate the weeds, and that's a little different from getting stuck in them. But what I did as an exercise to force myself to really appreciate some of those things is I actually rebuilt the instrument panel in the airplane. So last year at this time, I was wrapping up that project. And I literally took it all the way back to the firewall. Almost everything you see here, I wired. And, 400 or 500 wires all lined out in a spreadsheet. And this is not something that you can do if you don't have patience. And I've got to say, it kind of changed my wiring along with the airplane wiring a little bit. Because I really had to believe that the final product was worth it. And I really had to invest in those details. And, I wouldn't recommend doing that necessarily, and I may not do it again. But when I went back to my engineering team at work and to my clients, I really understood why the patience was required. Why does this screen talk to this one until a software update comes out, and all of a sudden the software update breaks a connection, or we don't even know what happened to it, And that's the real world. When Apple comes out with an update, it's right when you're trying to launch a new app, and it sets you back 2 weeks. That's the reality of technology development. It's the reality for my clients and for us internally. So to appreciate what the engineers and the implementers are actually doing, it really helps to do that. So I suggest that rule of 1/3, and then also don't be afraid of the details. Engage your team on that level. Understand what some of the problems are, and you'll be able to lead the company a lot better. Just like Steve Jobs, who is fairly detailed into the details of the design of the devices that Apple created. The same way we can use that patience to invest us in our actual product. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. How you have grown your own patience and what you do with the time that you use. And I'll always respond if I can. So thanks for your feedback.